Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar for round two of the Movement Activity and Sport Fund. My name is George Cole. I'm Director of Development at North Yorkshire Sport, and I'll be one of a team of North Yorkshire Sport staff who will be taking you through the slides and the briefing and the learning that we've got from round one as well. I'll just do a quick introduction of my colleagues who are on the call. So, Neil, if I come to you first.
Hi everyone, Neil Russell, Active Communities Manager.
Carla, if you can just say hello.
Hi everyone, Carla Burton, Active Community Manager.
And Izzy.
Hi everyone, Izzy Rhodes, Active Communities Manager leading on the Mass Fund.
Cool. And I think, do we have Garth yet? No, I think Garth will be joining us shortly as well. So, the colleagues on the call have all introduced themselves. Are working on this fund. Will likely be points of contact for you if you decide to progress an application or certainly want to find out a little bit more. So I will move through the slides. So just a few bits of housekeeping. Said already, we will be recording the webinar for the benefit of people unable to make it, or if you want to rewatch it and check anything again that we've said. You all should be muted on your way into the Zoom call, but please stay on mute for the presentation side. You can ask questions as we go using the chat function. If they're easy enough to answer back in the chat, we'll do that, and Carla's going to monitor that. But also we will have a chance for you to come off mute and ask any questions at the end as well. If Carla sees any meaty questions in the chat, she might store up that to be asked verbally, and we can give a verbal answer. So, but if you know if you get a bit of inspiration about a question as you go, just chuck it in the chat, and we can either pick it up as we go or answer at the end. So those are just the bits of housekeeping. The bits we're going to cover in this session will give you a bit of background and context. We'll talk through what the ingredients of a strong application look like. And this for us is the really important bit, is to really help you as potential applicants put together a strong application. We'll talk through some of the criteria and the mechanics of the fund, and that's really important. And then also finish off with a bit of a Q&A session so you can put any questions to us. So I'm going to cover a bit of the context to start off with. So just a little bit about North Yorkshire Sport. We're a charity working across York and North Yorkshire, which is coterminous with what this fund is about. Our reason for existence is around reducing inequalities through movement, activity, and sport. We're part of a national infrastructure, so there is an active partnership that covers every postcode in England. But we are the ones that cover in York and North Yorkshire. We've got a track record around managing funds, managing investment programmes, which include the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which we managed on behalf of North Yorkshire Council, and the Together Fund prior to that, which we managed on behalf of Sport England. And for anyone who may have active travel as part of their interest or remit, we're also managing the Active Travel Fund on behalf of the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. That closes on the 10th of April. So if your interest is active travel, then please do look at that. Details are on our website. So the context around the Movement Activity and Sport Fund is almost a year ago, Mayor Scaith announced an investment into movement, activity, and sport. And for us, working in this sort of sector, absolutely brilliant. Brilliant that the mayor is really committed to that. And he's not just committed to it because he likes it. He is committed to that because he believes that having healthy, thriving communities is a key foundation to some of the big ticket items that he's got on his agenda, such as growing the economy, improving skills, developing more people into the workforce. He sees that if we've got a healthy, thriving community, that foundation is just so much better for that, which again is brilliant. He implemented a sports steering group, and this program was co-designed by that sports steering group. And the main sort of purpose behind it is promoting physical activity to encourage behavioural and systemic change. And that's a real important angle for us, is around how this fund can really support people changing their behaviour, people adopting different habits and hobbies to be regularly active, and how we might change some of the systemic stuff, which is more that kind of the infrastructure that sits behind stuff that will outlast the length of this programme. North Yorkshire Sport, excuse me, were contracted to develop and manage the fund on behalf of the combined authority and the mayor. So we went through a process to put forward a bid as to how we would run the fund for them, and were successfully awarded that, and ran round one of the fund back in October of last year. The fund is eligible for activity and organisations in York and North Yorkshire, which should be explicit, but just to point out, it's for activity and people in York and North Yorkshire. And the end date for the programme and all activity and everything that needs to be delivered is January 2028. That is a hard deadline. All money needs to be spent, all activity needs to have finished by then. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the structure of the fund, just to make sure numbers are kind of everyone's aware of the numbers. So the announcement globally was the Moving Forward campaign had £7 million attached to it, with the 4 strands on screen: active travel, movement, activity and sport, men's mental health, and connected to the outdoors. Within that announcement was 2.75 million allocated to the movement, activity and sport fund. So a really good chunk of that 7 million allocated to movement, activity and sport. The element which North Yorkshire Sport are managing is 2,050,000 of that. Some of the funding has gone to the Police and Fire Crime Commissioner to explore diversionary activities and reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. So our part of the jigsaw almost is just over £2 million. In round one of the fund, we've allocated just over £1 million. So we have just over £1 million left to allocate. So there is still a sizable amount of the fund remaining. The sports steering group, when they designed the fund, highlighted priority groups that they wanted the fund to focus on, and these are really important, and these are almost your starting point to think about, is what I want to do aligned to these priority groups. First one is rural isolation, and looking at that, and not just because activity is happening in an area that's considered to be rural. It's really trying to focus people to hone in on the rurality combined with that increasing likelihood of people feeling isolated. So really think just beyond, oh, we're in a rural area, our project's eligible and it meets a priority group. Disability and inclusion is the second one. So really focusing on that inclusion of people with a disability. Women and girls is the third one. And this is project specifically designed for women and girls, and doesn't have to be exclusively just about how do you engage women and girls. It could be about that integration and that cut across. And then the fourth one is about early intervention and prevention in health. So projects that keep people active and healthy and stop maybe the onset of particular conditions. And then the one at the bottom, the Police and Fire Crime Fund, is the one I just mentioned earlier. That's about early intervention and prevention related to antisocial behaviour and crime. So this MASS fund, the Movement, Activity and Sport Fund, which we will call MASS, so apologies if we kind of drop into our slang, but focus on the 4 priority groups that we've referenced there. Next couple of slides I've got, and then I can tee up to the team to get more into the details and the specifics, is we've picked out the key learning from round one. And so this is our guide to anyone coming to round two to learn from what the applicants in round one went through. And the first thing to say is we had 153 applications, which, as far as I'm aware, has been the most popular funding programme that the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority have been involved in since they started, in terms of number of applications. So that was 153 applications that the team had to deal with around due diligence and appraisals. The total value of all of the awards would have been 3.2 million, which far outweighs the amount of money we had available. However, uh, by doing the due diligence and going through the eligibility of the projects, 43 of those were either deemed ineligible or at the point we went back with the first set of questions to check some things, either information that wasn't provided or to get clarity on what they were looking for. 43 applications were then either scrubbed off because they didn't meet the eligibility criteria or they chose to withdraw at that point because the question, they weren't able to answer the question. So the absolute message is read the guidance. Izzy and the team have worked really hard to refine the guidance from round one, make it as clear as possible to stop people essentially wasting their time by putting in an application. We don't want any, particularly volunteers, to be wasting their time putting in an application which is instantly sort of falling at the first hurdle because it's ineligible. So please do read the guidance. Some of the things linked to that, governance was really important, and for some, governance was a reason why they did not progress. What we want to say on that is governance may not be, it may be something that we can support with and work to develop your organisation with. So it's not a complete yes or no hard answer, but please do think about the governance side of things. We have particular rules in place and eligibility criteria around CICs. So if you're a CIC, please do read the guidance and check in with one of the team around that because we have particular challenges and eligibility criteria around CICs, but also particularly if you're doing capital, things around are you incorporated, because that helps in terms of liability of the assets that you've got ownership or control of. So governance is really important. So do speak to us about that. The other things to say really is we've had some instances in round one where some similar looking projects have had different funding outcomes, and we've had a couple of questions relating to that from an unsuccessful applicant who said, our project is almost a carbon copy of another project that got funded. And that's to say, we recognise that, but actually the things that sat behind the successful project, the ingredients, were different. And some of the evidence of need and demand was different. Some of the track record of things that had been done previously was different. So that's why those two similar looking projects had different funding outcomes. So if you look on the website to see what's been funded in round one, it doesn't mean necessarily that that's guaranteed to be funded in round two if it's a carbon copy of something else. So please do bear that in mind as well. And then the last few is, and we will talk about this in so much more detail, so I won't go too far into it, but projects that are quite supply driven are less likely to be funded. If you say, I can go out and deliver this to whoever, those are less likely to be funded. What we want is stuff based on need and demand of the priority groups. And next point there is that's quite easy for us to spot. We've kind of spotted that in quite a few, which made some of the projects score really low. And then the final two is submitting the right documents makes our due diligence process much smoother. There is a budget template. Please use that. Don't use your own spreadsheets. Everything we've got set up in terms of that process side is it goes into a system at the back end, and that helps us project manage it. It helps us with awards and things like that. So we have a set system in place, and the more you're aligned to that, the smoother our process can be. The more time we can spend giving development support, and also the smoother we can be in terms of communication around awards and things like that. So please be on it with the documents, follow the guidance on that. And the last point I will make on that is what we want you to think about focusing is on things that are new, things that enhance, or things that grow, not focusing on how do we continue something or replace something. And also the last thing on that is projects that looked for continuation or looked for core costs. Those things were taken out of any funding awards or were deemed ineligible. So please do kind of bear that in mind when you are looking at putting your application together. And the final slide before I hand over to Izzy is the team that you met at the start of this session are all have time in their week to be supporting and working and developing and nurturing you as applicants. And the reason we do that is, we're not just a grant giving charity. The grant giving is part of what we are doing, but ultimately we're about inequality, as I said at the start. And so for us, what we want to do with this fund is to make sure it reaches the people and places where the need and demand is highest. And to do that, we want to focus on funding the best ideas, not just the people who can put together the most polished applications, because those two don't always correlate. So yes, we'll need to see stuff written down and we'll need to see applications and we'll be judging them on what's written, but our team have that time and space in their work program to support and nurture and develop. So if you come to us with an idea and you can't quite translate that into the most polished looking application, that's fine. We can work with you on that. So do reach out and speak to us on the ideas. I'm going to leave it there and hand over next to Izzy, who's going to talk you through the revenue part of the Open Fund.
Yeah, cool. Can you hear me okay? Because I've been having technical difficulties. Great. Cool.
Yeah,
So,
all okay, Izzy, yeah.
Grand. So the next part of this presentation, we're going to be going over the 3 types of funding that you can request as part of this fund. So I'll chat about revenue, and then I'll hand over to you to talk about capital in a minute. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. So the Open Fund strand with revenue strand is essentially a grant that funds the operating costs of a specific project. That doesn't mean the continuation of core costs. It means the things that you need to be able to deliver a program or a project. So you can apply to the strand for program costs and allow you to take your offer to the next level, do something completely new, something really exciting, something that you might want to test for the first time. So something like this might look like a youth group applying for new and additional staff hours and equipment to create a permanent movement focused program that is specifically based off the demand from the young people that use this service. So this is kind of very much like program orientated. You want to design something to deliver, you want to trial it and test it, or you want to create something that you've already done a lot of research for, and you know it's going to work. That's kind of what this one is about. So applications for revenue projects need to be a minimum of 3,000 and it can't be more than 30,000. There is specific guidance for each of the types of funds on the website. So just make sure that you kind of know which one that you want to apply for and think of those guidance documents too. So that's practical revenue, and I'll hand over to capital, which is a little bit more complex. So I'll give it to Neil.
Thanks, Izzy. Next slide, please. So in terms of capital, we're typically talking about fixed assets, which could include building or creation refurbishment, for example, skate parks, bump tracks, or developing sports pitches. Applications for capital projects must be a minimum of 5,000 and a maximum of 49,999. Next slide, please. So just a few things that we'd like you to consider. Some of these are long-standing. Some of the things that what we've learned from round one. So the first one is, if you are looking to create something or refurbish a particular asset, do you own the freehold to the site where the development will take place, or do you have a lease which is uninterruptible for a minimum of 5 years up to 25,000 or 10 years up to 49,999? If you don't own the site or hold a lease, is that something that can be attained as part of the process and within the timeline that we're working to? We're not experts in this area, but we can provide some pointers, and we can provide some and we can refer you to people who can support with that. In terms of planning permission, do you need planning permission? And if so, have you already started that journey? Has it been achieved? And if not, where are you in the process? And again, are you confident that that planning permission can be achieved within the required time frame? Legal structure, as George mentioned previously, when it comes to the development of a capital asset, although being an incorporated body is not mandatory, it is something that we would provide support and pointers with, because as was mentioned previously, there is issues around potential liability for trustees and others if you are an unincorporated body. And one thing we want to ensure is that we don't see organisations and individuals taking on assets that lead to personal liability without providing the appropriate advice and support to accompany that. In terms of VAT, you will need to, if you are not VAT registered, you will incur VAT on potential capital build, and will need to factor that into your calculations. If there is an opportunity to partner with an organisation who is VAT registered, e.g. if you are looking to develop an asset on, for example, a local authority site, is there an opportunity to work with that organisation so that the VAT liability can potentially be mitigated? And have you considered risks and contingency? So what happens if the project costs go up? So if you only have enough to deliver the project and suddenly costs go up 10-20%, where does that leave you in terms of the delivery of the project? So things to be factored in.
I'll take this on. So Garth is the manager for the Workforce Fund. So the Workforce Fund purpose kind of speaks for itself. It's solely to develop a workforce. So you'll apply to this strand if you're planning to develop your workforce by upskilling staff and your volunteers, or diversifying the current offer you have in place. So this might be through additional training. You might want to have more bespoke training. So in order for you to be able to deliver something that demand for example, that you might be a sports staff who wants to train their coaches in disability awareness or autism consciousness training to be able to deliver more successfully for the people you already work with. So yeah, just consider how you diversify your offer and reach a different group to your core membership, or kind of how can you build this offering. So next slide, please. Thank you. So really strong applications for workforce will align with the York and North Yorkshire workforce framework themes. These are attract, develop, progress, and retain. So really thinking about that life cycle of colleagues in the workplace. Applications for the Workforce Fund, similarly to the Revenue Fund, the minimum is £3,000 and you can apply for a maximum of £30,000. Something to mention as well, if you are applying for a revenue or a capital fund and you feel that there are elements of your project that would benefit from additional training to kind of help integrate into whatever it is that you plan to do, you can also embed that into those applications too. So workforce funds, generally we say that if the majority of your application is looking towards developing your staff body or your volunteer body, it will go through workforce. If you're not quite sure, you can just shoot something. So I'll hand back over to Neil to talk about match funding criterion, which is quite a big element of applications.
Thanks, Izzy. Yeah, next slide, please. So in terms of match funding, we just want to explain how the match funding works according to the size of your project. So if you have a project that is between 3,000 and 9,999, there is no match funding required. If you have match funding, some match funding to bring, that's great, but it's not mandatory. Any project between 10,000 and 19,999, we will fund up to 90% of the total project cost. So if you have a project that is 19,999, effectively the maximum that we would fund is around about 18,000. Anything over 20,000, 20 to 49,99, we will fund up to 80% of the total project cost. So if you are asking, for example, 49,999, you come and have a project, you want the maximum, your project would need to be at least 62,500 in value. Next slide, please. In terms of total project costs, so the upper limit for capital projects is £250,000. So if you have a project idea that is £1 million, unfortunately, this is unlikely a fund that would be able to support that unless you have distinct phases of a project. Then come and have a conversation with us because it may be eligible. And the upper limit for revenue and workforce projects is 150,000. But as was mentioned previously, the maximum award that can be granted is 30,000. Next slide, please. So in terms of capital, so it states there that we would typically, same for capital and revenue. So anything that is up to 999 would be 9999 would be there'll be no match funding requirement. Anything up to 19999, there is a 20%, sorry, a 10% requirement, and that is regardless of whether that's capital or revenue. Then anything above 20,000, there is a 20% match funding requirement. And as mentioned previously, the upper limit for capital project 250k. Next slide, please. So in terms of revenue, as mentioned, anything up to 19,999, there would be a requirement for 10% match. The upper limit for revenue project is 150k. So in theory, that means that the 19,999 award could have 130,001 funding to take it up to 150k. Next slide, please.
The next slide is up, Neil. That just covers the 20 to 30.
Sorry. Yeah. So mass fund contribute no more than 80% of the total project cost, as has been identified. Upper limit for total revenue cost is 150k, and a £30,000 award could have up to £120,000 of match funding.
This is back to me. Can anyone hear me? Any better now? Sorry, I think my microphone wasn't very good before.
That does sound clearer, Izzy, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry. Big tech issues today. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about eligibility and talking about how to make a good application. Okay, great. Thanks, Jane. So who is eligible? Essentially, organisations with a governing document. So if you have a constitution or articles of association, you are eligible, and you can be from any sector. Sole traders are not eligible for this fund. You also have to make sure that you are based in York and North Yorkshire and have a record of actively delivering. You need evidence of safeguarding policies and processes. You're going to be asked this on your application form, and you'll be asked to submit your relevant safeguarding policy. We can support you to develop that if that's something that you are growing, or you want to have an additional one specifically for adults or specifically for young people and children. We can support you with that too, but it is something that is required as part of an application form. Evidence of financial history, you're going to be asked this as well on your application. So this will be evidence of the last 2 financial years of your accounts. If your organisation is younger than that, it will ask you for your entire financial history instead. Okay. So we also expect anybody to apply to provide the correct level of match funding. We've been a bit fancy for this round. So when you download the budget template, there is a formula in the template that will actually tell you how much match funding you are required to submit, or to say that you have against your project budget. So you'll fill in your total project budget, and it will tell you how much match funding you need as a minimum. So hopefully that's a little bit more helpful for people. And also requests within the funding threshold. If it's below three grand in a workforce or a revenue application, it will be deemed ineligible. If it's under 5 grand for a capital, it will be deemed ineligible. So just make sure that you're working within the funding thresholds. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a bit more on what makes a project or a cost ineligible. So this is not a full list of exclusions. Please read the guidance document, which does contain more details. So these are just a handful of things that kind of came up a few times that we thought we'd flag again for round one. So activities that are delivered within curriculum hours or specifically school-related activity are not eligible for this fund. Projects that have already started and costs have already been incurred are also ineligible. So please make sure that you don't start spending anything, or it's not a continuation of existing work. Make sure that this is a new project, or it's something that you can separate from something you've already delivered with the evidence that you've gained, and then you'll be able to deliver something new after. Contributions or reimbursement to core cost management fees, salaries, or business as usual is not eligible. If there are specific costs that are related to your project, that, for example, having a new member of staff and onboarding them, those costs would be eligible because they're specific for the project cost. But for your regular staff body, these contributions to reimbursements of core costs are not eligible. Projects outside of York and North Yorkshire, not eligible. The purchase of vehicles and automobiles are not eligible. And projects that will redistribute funds to service users or clients as smaller grants as well are not eligible. If you have people that you're working with that have great ideas, send them our way and we will support them if they've not written a bid before. That is kind of, we're very high support the way that we deliver this program. So yeah, send them our way and we can support them to do that themselves. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. Sorry, Jane, BAU is business as usual. Sorry, we were trying to put as few words as possible in in the slides. So I'll talk a bit more about what makes a strong application. So making sure that your project is eligible, please make sure you understand the criteria and read the relevant guidance. As George said, we really don't want you to waste your time, and we want to make sure that your ideas really get through. So please make sure you read the guidance. If it doesn't seem that this fund is actually your project's going to work for this fund, we can support you to look elsewhere for other funding opportunities. You need to have clear evidence and the need of demand from your target audience. You need to make sure that there is and I'll talk about that in a lot more detail in the next couple of slides. You need to make sure that there is a really clear legacy and sustainability plan. What happens when the funding period ends? Are you just going to create some amazing thing and then it's going to disappear? How are you going to build this into your delivery as a permanent product or service? Strong partnerships also make for a really strong application. If you can pool resources and join up and deliver something together, then that will again help that previous point of becoming more sustainable throughout and beyond as well. George mentioned as well, so strong governance. There's specific guidance for CICs in there. If you need support, if you're not quite sure, there are things that you've identified that you could improve as an organisation, put that in your application. There's a question that asks about development needs and support requirements. So be honest, just put it in there and we'll see what we can do to support you and point you in the right direction. We've mentioned already focus on priority groups. That was pre-decided when we got this fund. So we need to make sure that we are really focusing on those core groups. So that is women and girls, rural isolation and loan and access, disability and inclusion, and early intervention and prevention and health. So those 4 groups. Upskilling and empowering communities will really support that legacy beyond funding as well. So that will be a really strong portion of that. Kind of mentioned about kind of additional training. That's not just for the workforce fund. That's something that we really encourage across the board. Consideration of project risks. Risk is, it's there, it's always there. We just want to see how you manage it. So just be really transparent about those risks. And also please make sure you submit a very detailed budget. If it's not that detailed, we will ask you to resubmit it. Next slide, please. Let me get my notes up. So it's really important to start by saying that just because there is a need for something in an area or a community doesn't have a specific product or service or facility doesn't actually mean that there's a demand. So we want you to be able to define the difference and how these two marry up with each other. So the need really demonstrates the gaps in equality and inequalities that are systemic, and they make access to movement or sport much more difficult for particular groups. So this is really important data, and it will help inform how you can work closely with partners and use resources beyond your organisation. So this kind of evidence might look like public health data, deprivation data, Sport England active lives data, community surveys, or kind of much more broader, more Googleable items of data. As important as the need is to demonstrate, to be blunt, anybody can look this up. So we really want to see how you demonstrate the link between the need and demand. So what is significant about your project in your area for your community, for your organisation? That's what we really want to hear. So with demand, you'll be able to demonstrate this if you've already had those conversations with the people you want to create the project with or for. So strong ideas and applications will already be working with those that they want to support. And this is really important data. And it can come in a really big range of forms. It doesn't have to be formalized data. It can be kind of anything that you may have been collecting already. You just need to evidence it. So that can be if you've got something that has a waiting list already, you've already got partnerships with other organizations and you're getting referral routes through them. You've co-designed something with by targeted groups using kind of focus groups or conversations, or you've built long-term relationships with people. Referral routes, again, kind of already identified to go into your project. So an example might be a focus group with a dementia cafe group determined that there is an interest for a weekly walking group or a weekly movement group. So it has come directly from the people you want to work with. So both are really important, and good projects and good ideas will really demonstrate where high need meets a growing demand. So next slide, please. So just to be specific on this application process, we'll take a look at a couple of questions. So that first question on the screen, so question number 8, which of the following groups will be the primary target for this project? So this will be the group you choose will be the main beneficiaries of your program. So you need to ensure that your project is designed specifically to support them. Question 15 is, how do you know that there is a need for this project? So this is very much based on the split between the need and demand and how they work together. So be specific, don't be general. So avoid statements like there is a need in the community. Explain what the need is and how you know it exists. You'll want to hear that here you will want to show that you've listened to your community. The strongest ideas and the strongest applications will demonstrate that the idea comes from real voice surveys, conversations, lived experience, might be attendance numbers or partner feedback. So we will want to see that you are responding directly to your community and not assuming that just because they don't have, for example, a bike rack at the local park, that doesn't necessarily mean that families, parents, carers, grandparents would actually use one if it's there. So make sure you don't do anything about communities without them. So keep the nothing about me without me expression at the front of your mind. Make sure that you also connect your need to your proposed solution. So make sure that it's really clear that your project directly responds to what people have told you that they want or need. So center your solution around your needs. So how many steps do you have to take to ensure that your, say, intervention is A, wanted, and B, needed, and also is an appropriate and respectful solution to what people, the people you're working with. So yeah, as we've said, use any data that you have. This could be formal or informal. It's really useful in terms of demonstrating that you understand the wider impact of inactivity on your community. And yeah, evidence doesn't have to be super complicated. You just have to make sure that you've got it and that you can reflect that. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So how to apply. So the support that's available, we've got fund-specific guidance documents on the website that we keep banging on about, but they are really useful. They contain everything that you need on there. We have FAQs, and we're also going to host this webinar up on the webpage by the end of this week. When you apply, you're going to be assigned a case manager throughout. So that will be either myself, Neil, Carla, or Garth. And we will support you. So if we have any questions that we think actually we could really draw out something else from this application so that the panel get to see it, we'll support you to do that. If we've got any questions about your budget, we'll help you clarify them. So we are very much a high support team, and we want everybody to have the best chance possible. We'll also support you to connect with any partners. So if we see that there's a really good opportunity for your project to connect in with somebody else or a service that we think would really your project would benefit from, we'll also support you to do that if that's something that you also feel would benefit. And also, if you're honest about your organization's development needs, then that really helps us. We can help you to kind of grow as well. So yeah, it's support beyond your application. We want to make sure that we can be here for people for a long time. If you've got any questions about your application, email grants@northyorkshiresport.co.uk. That's also on the website, and it's at the end of all of the guidance documents as well. So the practicalities of applying, if we go to the next slide, please. So it's an online form. It says for each fund type, but it's actually just one. If you're applying for workforce, you'll have a couple more specific questions for workforce. If you're applying for capital, there'll be a couple more specific questions there, but they'll pop up when you select which one you're applying for. For each of the kind of descriptor, about your project questions, there is a 2,000 character limit per project question. Google tells me that's around 300 to 400 words, but we all know that varies. So just make sure when you're drafting your application that you kind of stick within that limit. Just to say, sorry, it wasn't on the previous slide, but there is a Word document that reflects all of the questions on there, so you can draft all your questions up and then just copy and paste it onto the form. We have actually managed to make the form savable, so you won't lose everything. But just in case I've messed something up on the IT side of that, please just make sure you're drafting it somewhere safe as well. So yeah, we'll have a case manager to support you. There will be, once the deadline of the 26th of May has passed, all applications will enter a due diligence process. Those that pass due diligence will move through appraisal and onto an independent panel who will make the final decision. So all decisions are signed off by York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, and they can't be appealed. So this is the last round of the Movement Activity and Sport Fund. So yeah, we anticipate it being very, very popular. So round 2 / the final time frame. So tomorrow is opening day. So you can submit your applications as of tomorrow. If you want to start working on your application already, the template for the questions are already up on the website, so you can download that Word document. And it closes on Tuesday, the 26th of May, with that due diligence and appraisal and panel decision making happening between June and July, and then decisions being communicated in July. So I'll leave it there. Any questions from anybody? I'll leave George to facilitate.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Neil, and Carla as well, who's been in the chat as well. So we'll pause for kind of breath there. We are now happy if anyone wants to sort of raise their hand, come off mute. We'll kind of field any particular questions. I know some of you need to duck out as well. Obviously, the recording will go up. And I think Carla's sharing some links now as well. But we have a question from Lisa. So if you want to come off mute and just ask the question, and we'll figure out who can answer it within the team.
Yeah, the question is with regards to the capital fund. The town council have got a project together with the sports field, which involves planning and replacement of existing storage sheds. So expenditure's already been incurred, which has been allocated from earmarked funds by the town council. So technically the project as a whole has started, but the element that the town council is going to need to apply for is the actual build costs. So even though some expenditure has been applied for, that isn't going to be part of the application. Is that okay?
Neil,
so like planning costs.
Yeah, Neil, do you want to? Pick
Yeah,
up?
I guess a couple of observations is, we mentioned around phasing earlier, and if there is certain phases of projects that have been delivered, but other phases that haven't, which we have seen in part of round 1, potentially could be eligible. I think we probably need to have a conversation and discuss that. I think the second point, which is probably more fundamental, is the link between storage sheds and increasing participation. I think that would be, we'd obviously have to understand what that was, because it clearly isn't just for existing participants. So we'd have to see how that linked to increasing participation by new participants from one of the priority groups.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. I'll just go to one in the chat first, and Jonathan, I'll come to you next. So Lizzie from Hadker has just asked about if a project hits 2 of the themes quite strongly. Yes, you do have to focus on one theme. The application form will only let you pick one of the 4 themes. You just need to pick one. We recognise there are some that will cut across quite a few. That's that's fine. But behind the scenes, we have a notional allocation against each theme. Now, they're not really strict, so we're not going to get to a quarter of the money spent on women and girls and then we don't fund any more. But in theory, that's a start point of where things are. From round one, they're broadly even. Broadly, I say. So there's not a massive thing of we've had loads of women and girls projects and none of the others. We're all quite even, but just pick one that you think it most closely resembles. So so that's just one from the chat from Sarah. And then if Jonathan, if we come to you for if you come off mute and ask the next one, please.
Yeah, I just wondered to what extent can an application span both capital and revenue projects, or does it have to focus on one?
Izzy, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, so if you've got we'd say if you've got any element of capital in it, it probably would be a capital project. It depends kind of what the split is on that. I can speak more on, say, if an application has a really good split of workforce and revenue, if it has, majority of the budget is going on workforce, we'd say it's probably a workforce application. Similar, so you'd probably apply the same rule to that. Neil, I don't know if you've got any other suggestions for that. That's how we've approached before.
Yeah, I mean, would you like to just elaborate, Jonathan, a little bit, just so that?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the project that we're considering is one to increase the membership of a club around specific target groups like women and girls. But if we successfully do that, then we may need to do other things like improve the quality or the size of our changing rooms. So it could be a revenue project which drives a capital project. Yeah.
I mean, what we have had sort of the other way, where we've had where clubs have already done that development work and have identified that they've come for a capital project fundamentally to support the revenue work that they've already done. I mean, I think for me it would be down to the specifics. So I'd welcome a conversation. So if you want to drop me an email, we can jump on a call and we can explore.
That'd be great. I mean, to be fair, I think ours would probably be a revenue project. I think the capital is just almost just thought I'd ask the question just in case.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a couple of things I think possibly Neil will have mentioned this in the capital is it links back to, if people are planning a capital development, we've got till January 2028 when we need the ribbon cutting and and all the money spent for that phase. So that links back to one of the reasons why the total project value is not massively high. We're not talking about £1 million projects here. We've kind of capped a capital project total cost of being 250k because actually we need to make sure that we create the conditions for that to be manageable in that time frame as well. So that's just an important thing to kind of add in there. Going back to the chat, Sarah's put about understanding the need around real voice data to support need and demand, but it's not able to get that easily. So there's a clear need in published research and data. So that evidence of need might be there, but the demand is a bit harder to achieve. Izzy, I don't know, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of we're very much focusing on community work and development work and projects that are that were successfully funded previously have already done kind of the baseline, or they've already got the relationships in the place that they wanted to deliver their project. So another thing that is quite tricky, yes, it is difficult to get that real voice data. So you may want to consider partnering up with a community organisation. So I don't know the context of your project, Sarah. You might want to partner up with a community organisation that has a vested interest in your idea. That would then support you if there is a demand there. That would then support you to be able to deliver that project and demonstrate that need and demand. So it's not necessarily something that you would have to go out and find yourself, but it's something that that partnership work is really, really valuable, and being able to do that and share those resources. Another point to make is that it's a relatively short period that projects need to be delivered in, and that type of work, if you don't already have those kind of networks and those relationships in place, that could mean that your project actually may not be achievable in the timeline. So it's about thinking smartly, thinking about like where can you go, where are the resources already, and to really make the most of your project idea. But similarly, if anybody's got any other questions, just you can email the grants inbox, and we'll pick it up and have a chat with you if it's similar to this or you're not quite sure. Yeah, we're very happy to have a conversation with you about your ideas.
Thank you, Izzy. Sarah, you kind of asked about a follow-up chat. Yeah, just drop that grants email address and email, and one of the team will pick that up, and kind of this, same applies to everyone else in terms of specifics. We'll cover a lot today, but we're never going to get into everyone's specifics around that. One of the things just to kind of say and flag in relation to that is for a number of years working across the sector, we have seen a lot of supply-driven, national programs that have emanated from government or from bodies like Sport England, and have kind of been parachuted into places and delivered, and then they go away when a funding cycle ends. And we really want to be learning from a lot of that around actually what works best is when we create those conditions locally, when the groups and the people and the places that are invested in it are involved in that kind of expressing that demand for stuff. Those conditions really help support the stuff that's lasting, the stuff that sticks beyond the lifetime of the funding, and the funding actually is just that kickstarter for it. And doesn't create that reliance. And so that's from years of our experience of seeing what works and what gives us the best chance of success, which is why we're really hot on the need and demand and less about the supply element. We've got a number of providers who've applied who were like, we can deliver this, this, and this, and that's fine. And we're not questioning the quality of what they can do, but they're asking for funding to deliver what they can deliver without really any knowledge of, will anyone turn up to it? So that's why we're really hot on the need and demand element of it. And now I've done that bit of filler, I'm going to invite any final questions that anyone may have. It's your chance to raise your hand and ask. And if not, I think I've bought sufficient time there. I can't see anyone with a hand up. So thanks to Izzy, Neil, and Carla for putting it all together today, and thank you all for attending, and bid you a good day. Thank you.